Now, that looked really quite bad. Now, on his right eye, essentially, it was sort of filled
bloodshot, wasn't it?
with blood, completely bloodshot.
Welcome to the Royals with Roya and Kate. I'm Roya Nikar from the Sunday Times.
And I'm Kate Mancy from The Times. Today, we revel in the splendour as King Charles rolls out the red carpet for the state visit of President Macron of France.
And there, joining the King and President Macron at the royal banquet at Windsor Castle was you and I, Kate, and the Princess of Wales. Her first state banquet in almost 2 years.
So we're going to look at what was said, what was eaten, what was worn, and what it all means for the palace and the Entente Cordiale, or should that be Entente Amicale?
It's had a bit of an upgrade, hasn't it? And we'll get a little sneak peek to the King's Tourist exhibition at Buckingham Palace. So, turning first to the 3-day state visit from France's President Macron and his wife Brigitte, which kicked off in earnest on Tuesday with all the bells and whistles of all the King's horses and the carriages.
All the King's men.
All the King's men and the state banquet. And some speeches after a very long speech in the House of Parliament.
And this wasn't just pageantry and pomp, but a declaration that despite Brexit, Britain and France are bound by history and purpose. This idea that the countries are going to continue to have a glorious relationship together despite Brexit. And this is the first visit by a European leader since Brexit was instigated. Not since the referendum, but since it was instigated.
Which Macron kept reminding us of, didn't he? That Brexit was a bad move, so he says.
He was not a fan, of Brexit.
Not a fan.
Yeah, that's right.
Which he made very clear during his 45-minute speech in the Houses of Parliament. Much longer than the one you and I had to sit through in Monaco, Kate.
And it's a different tone, wasn't it? I think there's a real awkwardness between Starmer and Macron. And this is where, in comes the King to make it sort of better.
More of a lovin'.
More of a lovin'.
Much more of a lovin'.
Very touchy-feely, very tactile. They were patting each other's arms and hands. And despite the fact this is a state visit and normally there'd be quite a lot of engagements with the King and Queen, this 3-day visit is very government heavy.
It is.
We all know why Macron's here. It's to flesh out a deal with Starmer and tackle some of those thorny issues like migrant crossings in the Channel and how to develop a relationship or keep that relationship going post-Brexit.
So before he arrived at Downing Street today for that lunch and that summit, it was the King's job and the Queen's job and William and Kate's job to butter him up as much as possible.
Butter him up.
And make
literally with a banquet.
President Butter. And make him feel, other butters are available, and make him feel as warm and fuzzy and appreciated as possible. Mm-hmm. And I definitely felt like watching him yesterday, and you or I were there all day, as those carriages processed through Windsor, swung into the quadrangle at Windsor Castle, and he was doing that Guard of Honour inspection, and then watching him process into the state banquet and just looking at his face as he was taking in the surroundings of St George's Hall. You could tell it affected him. You could tell it had impact.
He looked quite emotional at points as well. I mean, but also mostly thoroughly delighted.
Absolutely thrilled.
When Jacques Chirac came over in 1996, he had a wobble beforehand because he thought that the carriage procession would look outdated and really antiquated. And his wife and his daughter and his aide kind of talked him into it and said, no, you got to do this. This is really important. So he did it and he loved it. And Chirac was there kind of blowing kisses to the crowd, and the late Queen looked quite bemused sitting next to him. But I don't think Macron's ever had any qualms like that because he came into power before his sort of election campaign in 2017. In 2016, he kind of set aside his stall as the king that France didn't know it needed. And he's always presented himself in quite a regal fashion. So to be treated like this is just exactly what he presumably thinks he deserves.
Well, Brigitte was picking up the Jacques Chirac blowing kisses from the carriages theme because she was blowing kisses at anyone who would look yesterday from the carriage. But it was very warm, wasn't it? And I think you could see how much he appreciated the genuine warmth of the welcome from not just the King and Queen, but from William and Kate, who obviously went to meet them at the airport and escorted them to Windsor. And that was a nice touch too.
Yeah, it was, wasn't it? But also the fact that we'll come on to this separately, but the fact that the Princess of Wales is the first time she's been so involved in a state visit for nearly 2 years, like you said in the beginning.
And there were all the diplomatic touches straight off. From the moment we saw William and Kate go to RAF Northolt, There was the princess in a dusty pink Dior outfit, of course. French designer, French fashion house with so much history, often worn by the First Lady herself.
And earrings from the late Princess Diana, who is
Yes.
still very well thought of in France.
Absolutely. And then when they came to Windsor Castle and, we started to see the interaction, and then they had lunch. After lunch, they had this wonderful show of, which they always do on state visits, items from the Royal Collection Trust, which speak to the French-UK alliance over the centuries. So there was English poetry that Napoleon had read and sent to one of his relations, which I loved, because one of the wonderful touches at the state banquet last night was that the Waterloo Chamber, where the musical performances were supposed to take place, was renamed for the night into the music room. We don't mention Waterloo around here, which happened actually before when Sarkozy was here.
Oh, yes.
And I just think that's a brilliant diplomatic nod. Don't mention Waterloo to the
Don't
French.
mention the war. I think there were so many kind of touches, weren't there, about that. I think the king made a point during his speech about the wine list, the fact that they were drinking English sparkling wine, but actually it's been created by Tettinger.
I thought that was quite punchy to serve English sparkling wine to the French president.
It's okay, I think, if it's made by Tattinger.
Yeah, I love that. It's a bit of a fudge, but yes.
I think there was that, and then we had Raymond Blanc in the kitchen. So we were told he was preparing the starter and the dessert, and the household staff were preparing the regular sort of castle chefs were preparing the main chicken supreme.
Now this was
the main course.
This was the first state visit we've had at Windsor Castle for quite a long time. Of course, Buckingham Palace is going through this major renovation, this spruce up.
Well, Sarkozy was the last one in 2008.
It was, very long time ago. But it was quite extraordinary. You and I got to walk in and see St George's Hall and do a preview of the state banquet and to see it all laid out. It had taken 6 days to lay that table. There's a lot of glassware and a lot of candelabra. And I have to say, walking into St George's Hall was absolutely a sort of just vision and an assault on the senses, with the flowers, the settings, and from every bit of the sort of walls either side, those suits of armour. I think as far as pomp and pageantry and bells and whistles go, state visits at Windsor Castle, from what we saw yesterday, during the day as well as the state banquet in the evening, was a bit of an extravaganza, wasn't it? It was everything you'd want it to be. It was very glamorous. It was very glitzy. It was very formal. You can't get much more formal than white tie and tiaras. But there was just something about the history and the splendour of Windsor Castle being all dressed up.
The oldest occupied inhabited
Castle.
royal castle in the world.
Yeah.
And the twinkly lights, there's everything sort of candle lit in the evening, and they put tiny little lampshades over the candlesticks.
I loved seeing, because we were in the Queen's Gallery, which was, I have to say, as holding rooms go for the media, pretty extraordinary. There was a large chandelier hanging from the ceiling and plenty of gilt mirrors and beautiful oil paintings. What I loved was peering out of the window a few times and seeing guests being driven up on little golf buggies from Henry VIII Gate all the way up, past the Round Tower, up to the quadrangle, to the entrance. That was rather wonderful.
Yeah, and William famously whizzes round on a little electric scooter, doesn't he, when he's there?
I really must ask to get my ride on a golf buggy when I'm next at Windsor Castle. I'm made to walk, Kate.
That's just not acceptable. Don't they know who you are?
Working on it.
Also, it's the hall, of course, which burnt down in 1992 in the Great Fire of Windsor Castle and had to be completely rebuilt. And when they rebuilt the roof, they actually made it taller or higher up. And they had to really work out how that roof was made, because all those kind of skills had pretty much died out. So it's historic. The King made reference to that fire, didn't he, in his speech, and likened it to the Notre Dame Cathedral fire. Starmer will be thinking, Macron will be thinking, how do we rebuild that relationship from the ashes of Brexit?
Yes.
In other ways. But it's interesting. There was definitely this sense of, things haven't always been great between us. Things haven't always been great in our respective countries, or even in the room that we're sitting in. but let's move forward together. And he talked about it, the Entente Cordiale becoming the Entente Amicale.
It's had an upgrade.
It's had an upgrade.
It's gone from business class to first class. We're now the Entente Amicale.
It's been rebranding. It's got a new name. And he talked about them not just being friends, but family. And I don't think you can get much warmer than that in terms of, the way, all everything around the speech, everything that was being intimated throughout the course of the date. I don't think they could have done much more to show not just Macron, but the world and the rest of Europe. Look, we're with, we can have these relationships. We can have these friendships.
Despite Brexit. I thought what was really interesting about those two speeches, obviously the King spoke first and then Macron replied. There was a lot of humour, a lot of warmth. It was the first time I can think of that I've heard a speech from the King during a state visit where he hasn't mentioned his mother. And, when we went to France and we went to Germany, there was so much reference of Queen Elizabeth in those countries, the mutual respect and admiration from other heads of state and those long relationships built up with her. What was fascinating was Macron mentioned her almost immediately at the top of his speech. He talked about, he paid tribute to her and he used that wonderful phrase again. He redeployed it, which he used when she died, which he put out on social media saying, to you, she was your queen. To us, she was the queen. And I thought it was wonderful, and it was a memorable moment at the beginning of his speech, and it sort of laid that sort of outlook, as you mentioned, about family and how important the bonds are between France and us, even though we haven't always been the closest of allies. How we want to kind of make that much closer now.
Yeah, I think the King has mentioned that before, didn't he, when he went to Versailles? I mean, France was supposed to be the first outward state visit of his reign. It didn't happen because there were riots in the country, and Germany kind of leapfrogged and went first. But it should and would have been the first visit. So it shows how important that relationship is, not just for the royal family, of course, but the government who are setting out these plans for all this to go forward.
There was a nice touch this morning, actually, when they said an official goodbye to them at Windsor Castle. Again, the late Queen was brought sort of into proceedings because there was a sort of show of some carriages, but also this wonderful horse that Macron had given Queen Elizabeth, a beautiful dapple grey gelding, and he was brought out of his stable. And
we haven't killed the gift. Still got it.
And it turns out that Princess Anne has been riding him privately, not on trooping, still on naughty noble on trooping, but we're told he's a bit of a bite, a little bit of a nibbly boy, but very well behaved.
And there's a charabanc as well.
Yeah.
A historic charabanc that's been gifted from the French years beforehand.
But it was a proper love. And again, when they said goodbye, there were, it was very warm, lots of kisses, seemed to be a plan being hatched between Brigitte and Camilla to meet each other privately.
Yes.
Maybe on the side. Yeah. It's I think it's genuine affection there. It's not just for soft power diplomacy.
Yeah. I think that's it. I mean, we should speak about the King's bloody eye yesterday. Now, that looked really quite bad. Now, on his right eye, essentially, it was sort of filled
bloodshot, wasn't it?
with blood, completely bloodshot. And Palace was saying it's a burst blood vessel, saying it's not related to any illness or treatment that we currently know about, just one of those things. But obviously you can't get away from the fact that he's still having weekly cancer treatment.
Yeah.
He's still doing an awful lot. The courtiers I saw in Buckingham Palace this morning all looked really shattered after this, just yesterday and all the events that have been coming up. And the King ploughs on. You do wonder whether it sort of takes its toll on him. And then you see something like that. So, had that been the late Queen, it would have. And it has been the case, when Prince Philip had black eyes, when he has had sort of bruising around his face as he got older, that became a kind of huge story. It seems ridiculous, I suppose, but it's not so much now. But it is interesting to note it because it was just so obvious.
Yeah, it was. No,
but it slowed him. It didn't seem to slow him down.
No, nothing seems to slow him down, does it?
Even though Macron appeared to be a bit late, and thank goodness it was only 10 minutes, the speech.
Why do you think that was? Because his speech was so long. He doesn't know how to make a short speech, does he, old Emmanuel?
Well, last night was 10 minutes, wasn't it? It wasn't too bad.
Do you think he was told to
pretty good? Yeah.
Make haste 100%. After his lengthy Houses of Parliament, where I was reading some wonderful political sketches today where various peers started nodding off and, a few were struggling to... His accent got heavier and heavier as the speech wore on. Now, the other very notable moment and moments of yesterday in the optics was that, of course, the Princess of Wales, who we've seen at state visits previously, and we saw her at the Qatar state visit. But she just did the arrival for that. She didn't do the state banquet. We haven't seen her at a state banquet since the South Korea state banquet in 2023. And I think, again, we had her talking just last week about how she doesn't always feel great and everyone has expected you to be back on form once you finish chemo, and that's not the case. But I think it was welcome and encouraging to see her take part in the full day and be at the state banquet, looking fantastic in that red dress, didn't she? By Givenchy. And I think
Sarah Burton, her wedding dress designer,
who's
now at Givenchy. Yeah, you get in a room like that, and she really is, the celebrity that everybody's looking at. Not a celebrity; she's a member of the royal family, of course. But in a room where you've got Sir Elton John, Sir Mick Jagger, Christian Scott Thomas, Mika. You had Mary Earps, the female football goalkeeper who plays for Paris Saint-Germain.
Anthony Gormley, Sebastian Folkes. It was a very starry affair.
But then you get Princess of Wales in the Lover's Not Tiara, and it's a kind of a
red Givenchy caped gown.
A showstopper.
Yeah, she is. Yeah, she is. The princess is the ultimate trump card, isn't she? I think that they play, and there's no great surprise we saw her sitting next to Macron at the table.
Yeah, Macron was in between Princess of Wales and the King. I mean,
as seating plans go, it's not a bad draw, is it? How was your draw last night, Emmanuel? Yeah, it was all right. I had Charles on my left, Kate on my right. And that was the nice thing as well about the way the tables were done at Windsor last night. Normally at Buckingham Palace, they all sit on top table, don't they? Whereas here they were split up. So Macron was next to the King and Kate. Brigitte was next to William on the other side.
Well, we probably should talk about William because he was mentioned in the King's speech and talks about previous Williams in the royal family and saying, my son's decided to make his family home here at Windsor. At which point Macron seemed to kind of give a little wink, didn't he, to William across the table. Oh, he's talking about you.
He was doing a lot of winking last night, Macron. He definitely, when he walked in and arrived and they sort of took their seats, he winked at Brigitte. I think he just sort of looked round to Gloria and it was a wink as if to say, can you believe this? Can you believe this is all for us?
Proper white tie occasion. And the senior members of the royal family wear the royal family order.
What's the royal family order, Kate?
Royal family order is in the gift of the monarch. It's a little picture of themselves set in an oval with diamonds. Used to be on ivory, and now under the King's reign he has it on polymin, which is a synthetic, sustainable, very king-like fabric, I'm told.
I haven't got one if it's in the King's gift.
I haven't got
Have you got one?
No, you have to be a senior member of the royal family. I'm sorry. So that kind of...
It's just fine print.
Bit, it's a tough club to get into.
Who does them? Who designs them? Who paints them?
So I spoke to Elizabeth Meek, who is a miniature portraitist. And she is... What's interesting about her is she's completely self-taught, and she was a nurse for years, was told she would never amount to anything by her art teacher, and difficult family background, bought a book for £5 on how to paint miniatures and said to herself, I think I can have a go at that. She ended up as part of the Society of Miniature Portrait Painters, of which the King, then Prince of Wales' patron, got to know him, painted him at Highgrove. And when he needed his family order doing...
Who did he turn to?
He thought of her. And she said he's got a memory like an elephant. He remembers people and he remembers what they can do, and commissioned her to do it. And she was terrified, of course, because she thought, oh, gosh, maybe I can't do it. But she did this tiny little, sort of 3 by 4 centimetres portrait of him, and it took her 100 hours.
Wow.
And she sort of barely stopped when she did it. And the original goes in the Queen's order, Camilla's, and then a kind of reproduction, slightly smaller, goes into all the other senior members of the royal family, so Princess of Wales, Princess Royal, and surrounded by diamonds on a sort of silk ribbon. What was interesting last night, I thought, and I can never really get a sort of straight answer as to how these decisions are made, but the Princess of Wales was wearing the royal family order for the late Queen and the one for the King, whereas the Queen was only wearing the one for the King.
Huh, interesting.
And nobody seemed to know
why.
I mean, it's not to say that she wouldn't wear the late Queen's family order on another occasion.
Yeah.
Now, Roya, what would a state visit be without a shower of gifts? What do you get the man who's got everything?
Well,
what did the King give President Macron?
He gave him all sorts.
All sorts.
But
Licorice all sorts.
he gave him licorice all sorts. But he gave him a sapling, didn't he? A sapling oak tree from one of the Windsor nurseries, which is going to be planted in France and will grow and hopefully grow and represent the growing warmth between our two great nations.
Loves a tree, does he? Doesn't he?
Love a tree.
Good on him.
Yes. And he also gave him, what else did he give him, Kate?
A set of 12 placemats featuring watercolours of Scotland and France, painted by
The king.
the king.
Here's some of my work.
He's done a painting and had it made up into placemats because there's websites where you can do that.
That's so
he's done that.
I love his
I like
watercolour
that.
show
I do
and
that
tell
with my-
for the Macrons. Do you think they're going to have their fish and
I do that
chips
with my
back in
kids'
Paris?
art for my parents at Christmas.
Do you think the king, who isn't the most tech savvy monarch we've ever had, let's be honest, do you think he selected choose your prints, chose his prints, and then do you think he went on the computer and like put them in?
Yeah,
I
no,
think he didn't.
no,
I think someone said, Your Majesty, what might be a nice idea? And he probably said yes.
So do you think they're going to sit there and have their croissants with their placemats and go, well, of course, this is the picture done by the king? It's quite an icebreaker over lunch
Possibly.
or dinner.
Let's find out.
But, okay, what did Macron bring the king?
Macron brought
Apart from
the king.
his joie de vivre and his charm
Macron brought
and
all
long
of those
speeches.
things. A trumpet, because nothing says thanks for having us like a trumpet. What are you going to do with that, Charles?
Well, I think Charles would like to play that, to be honest. We've seen him play a carrot.
We
this
have
year,
seen him play a
Anything
carrot.
is possible.
I think the gift he brought that he's going to love was a hamper of produce from the Elysee Palace, including homemade honey, because we know he likes honey.
Nice.
So he brought him some honey.
That's well thought out.
Yeah, and he brought him a beautiful, original, very old score of some music by Debussy, who, again, we know that the king is a huge fan of classical music and is a big fan of Debussy. So it's very well thought through.
I love the idea that there's a meeting, by the French government, heads of state and ministers about what should we get the king.
And referencing the other gift that they were given, the placemats, Charles's watercolours, Brigitte and Emmanuel gave him a watercolour set, special wooden watercolour set that was inscribed. And we'll have to see whether the king takes those out and uses those for his next watercolours that he paints. Anyway, they're very thoughtful gifts.
But another big gift we're getting from the French on loan.
It's a biggie. It's been promised before and not delivered.
The Bayeux tapestry. So if you've got déjà vu, that's probably for good reason. This is, of course, the famous tapestry that illustrates the Battle of Hastings of 1066. And we're told it's going to return to the UK on loan for the first time in more than 900 years.
Now, we've heard this before because it was promised under Theresa May's government and it never appeared. There was a bit of politics going on. I think France didn't get a few bits and pieces they were asking for in return, and so it did not come. But we are going to lend some treasures from Sutton Hoo as part of this. This is a different kind of French exchange, isn't it? I think it'll be grand. I saw it once when I was very young on a school trip to France. And I remember thinking it was very dark where it was displayed, as obviously it would have to be to protect it.
And it's obviously quite a big deal part of the state visit because it was mentioned in Macron's speech.
Great flourish, yes.
Yeah, he went on for quite a while about that.
Well, George Osborne, I was listening to this morning, is very excited about getting his hands on it.
Well, it was
Museum.
sort of down to him that he's been trying to push for this for a long time, hasn't he?
So I think it's fair to say, Kate, that it was the full bells and whistles yesterday in terms of everything you can throw at a state visit and more. It had all the trimmings. We're going to have to see what other trimmings can be pulled out and stuck on when the Donald rolls into town in September, because he's going to want extra Yorkshire pudding trimmings, isn't he?
Yorkshire pudding trimmings. What will they serve?
But he loves a burger.
French fries.
He loves a burger.
Maybe the tree will be a maple tree.
See what we've done there.
Yeah.
Don't mention Canada.
It's going to be brilliant. It's going to be a fest. It's going to be beautiful. The most
be the
beautiful US presidential visit we've ever seen.
One that we've ever seen.
I think that's what we'll be told.
We'll be there.
We'll be there. Now, moving away from the banquet hall, reluctantly, and Windsor to Buckingham Palace, because earlier in the week, Roya, you went around to have a look at the new exhibition in the staterooms.
I did. So this is the new exhibition that's opening, I the King's tour artists at Buckingham Palace for its summer opening in the staterooms, and there's a selection of around 70 paintings that are in the King's personal collection that have been painted by artists over the years from the 1980s to the present day by artists who have accompanied the King and now the King and Queen on overseas trips. And these are ones that he's chosen personally from various portfolios that hang in various royal residences privately, but the public get to see them. And there are some wonderful pieces. I know you were there today with the King.
Yeah, I was there with the King and Queen today as they went to meet the tour artists. They were sort of standing by their paintings, which was rather nice.
I enjoyed. There were some really interesting paintings, and I love seeing the work. You know, all the way from the 1980s to the present day. You have Fraser Scarf's pictures there, and we know that he paints with an iPad. We've talked about him. I loved seeing there was a work there by John Ward, who was the very first tour artist, who went to Venice with the then Prince of Wales in 1985. And I'm always very fond of seeing John's work because John actually painted both my parents. He's very famous as a portrait artist.
Oh, I'd love to see those.
Yeah, we have them.
Oh, nice.
And so I was very intrigued to see some of his work, that's not portrait style. So it was lovely to see those.
That's interesting. I met his son today,
Yeah,
Toby Ward. So
yeah.
he was showing the King and Queen around. Now, Toby Ward, his son, wasn't just there to talk about his dad's work, because he then followed in his father's footsteps and became an artist after some time in the military. And he went on tour as well with him. But he was sort of saying, oh, Dad had it easy because...
Where did he go?
Because, John Ward was in Venice. On the Royal Yacht Britannia. It's all very civilised. There's a lovely kind of watercolour that his father did, and he was sitting next to the then Prince of Wales, who did a similar. And we were playing a fun game. Which one is the
flag? Yeah,
of the artist, and which one is the prince? And he said, well, when I went to the Gulf, it was a million different visits. You're herring around from one place to the other. You need to get into car 6 of the convoy, otherwise it's going to go without you. And that was quite a kind of familiar theme for a lot of the artists I spoke to, who were saying it's sort of this kind of whirlwind rabbit in the headlights scenario where you're just going from one place to another, and it's not what they're used to. They're used to sort of sitting serenely in a field and capturing the landscape or working in a studio. And including Claudette Johnson. So she was nominated for the Turner Prize last year. And she said, well, when I was asked, I said no, basically. I had to really consider it because this is not something I'm used to. She went on the Rwanda trip that we went on in 2022.
Fantastic trip, I remember that very well.
Yeah,
particularly did an excellent dinner with you, Kate.
We did have an excellent dinner. It was a really interesting trip. And so it's interesting what they capture as well, because it's not just a kind of vanity project that they go and do, portraits of the King and Queen. They're allowed to sort of free rein to do whatever it is they want. And I was perhaps under the misconception that he was following, the King was following some sort of historic protocol. But actually he sort of came up with the idea that someone should just come with him and paint. I'm sure Queen Victoria had artists and things in residence, but he is such a patron of the arts, and that and a lot of what they were saying, a lot of them were saying they by accepting to come as a tour artist, that he's pushing them outside their boundaries.
Yeah.
He's furthering their art.
They have free rein. What I love is they're not
told paint that.
They're not given a strict protocol. They're not given any protocol. They're given free rein to do whatever they want. We spoke to a wonderful artist called Susanna Fiennes, who accompanied the King to Oman, the Falklands, and Hong Kong, that historic handover of Hong Kong back to China in 1997. She's got some wonderful anecdotes. I'm not going to say much more because we've recorded a wonderful special episode which will come out in early August, and you can hear some anecdotes from her, and we walk and talk through the exhibition. It's rather wonderful, and you'll be able to listen to that and watch it on the YouTube channel. But it is a very wonderful tradition, and it's a very wonderfully sort of visual part of bits of trips that we go on and see, but they capture what we don't see, and they capture what the cameras don't see as well.
And also what was funny to hear from their point of view is quite similar to what we experience as well, because it's a bit familiar of losing bits of equipment and missing boats and being stranded on random beaches in the Caribbean and things like that, and just the kind of the sort of brilliant chaos and the fun of it all. I think
it's a wonderful tradition, and it's well worth, if you're in London And
it opens this
fancy
week.
a trip to the staterooms. It's well worth seeing. And also, you can at the palace at the moment, you can also see, as part of the summer opening, the 2 coronation state portraits.
Peter Kulfeld was there today. So he also did the King's official coronation portrait. But he was a tour artist on 6 tours.
I saw that because one of his paintings is in the exhibition. Yeah,
So
well known to the King.
Yeah, and they got on. They get on very well. You could see. So the King was really pleased to be reunited with him. So yeah, lovely. Really, I'm looking forward to that episode. Well, sadly, that's all we've got time for, Roya. I better go off and file a story.
Off you go, Kate. Good luck with that. Au revoir.
A bientôt.